Welcome to the BioPharma Business Intelligence Unit, where symbolic integrity meets strategic clarity. At BBIU, we go beyond the headlines to decode the structural forces behind global biopharma, AI, and economic realignment. If you value precision, verification, and symbolic depth, this channel is for you. Subscribe now to access our weekly briefings, dossiers, and intelligence reports, and consider joining our institutional tier to unlock early warning systems, custom metrics, and exclusive strategic insight. You're not just listening, you're entering the future of epistemic intelligence. www.biopharmabusinessintelligenceunit.com.
South Korea's digital catastrophe, the NIRS fire, and the structural fragility of national e-governance executive summary. On September 26, 2025, a fire at the National Information Resources Service, Daejeon headquarters, triggered the most severe disruption in South Korea's digital governance infrastructure since its creation. At least 96 core systems, including e-People, Kuminsumungo, the National Law Information Center, and Integrated Veterans Services, were paralyzed, with full restoration expected no earlier than late October. Out of 647 systems affected, only 25, 3.9%, had functioning disaster recovery (DR) backups. Citizens were forced to revert to in-person fax or postal methods for basic administrative requests, exposing the fragility of a state celebrated for its digital advancement. Investigations point to aging lithium-ion UPS batteries, flagged in prior inspections as beyond service life. Government manuals published in 2024 had already outlined battery fire scenarios and countermeasures that were not implemented. President Lee Jae-myung vowed to accelerate recovery and build redundancy, dual systems, but editorial voices warn that South Korea's administrative state has been left effectively paralyzed by a preventable infrastructure failure. Structured BBIU opinion. The fire at the National Information Resources Service in Daejeon is not simply a technological accident, nor an unfortunate anomaly. It is the structural mirror of how South Korea governs itself in the digital age. Beneath the global reputation of being a smart state, the country's administrative backbone has been revealed as fragile, centralized, and lacking the most basic redundancies that any modern government should take for granted. At the surface, the narrative is technical. Lithium-ion batteries in the UPS, well past their service life, ignited and destroyed critical systems. Yet the deeper truth is cultural and institutional. For more than 2 years, budget had already been allocated to duplicate these servers in order to prevent exactly such a collapse. Manuals drafted in 2024 explicitly described the fire risk of batteries and recommended responses. Inspections flagged the outdated equipment, and yet nothing was done. What failed here was not technology, it was execution, accountability, and governance. This incident is part of a broader Korean pattern. Improvisation replaces preparation, urgency overwhelms importance, and narrative substitutes for truth. The government now urges calm and promises rapid recovery, but the disaster reveals that only 3.9% of affected systems had functioning disaster recovery protocols. In practice, that means 96% of South Korea's state services were operating on a single point of failure. This is not resilience. It is systemic negligence. The NIRS fire also connects to a larger cycle of Korean disasters. The collapse of Songsu Bridge in 1994, the Sampoong department store in 1995, the Sewol ferry in 2014, the repeated data breaches of SKT, KT, and LGU+, and the most recent trade negotiations with the United States all reveal the same conduct. Warnings existed, resources were available, but institutions chose not to act. Instead, they safed the moment with partial measures, ambiguous statements, or outright contradictions. Culturally, this reflects a deeper inversion of values. Relationships are prioritized over responsibility. In bureaucratic life, not upsetting a superior outweighs following a manual. In politics, preserving harmony with a powerful ally becomes more important than defending national interests with rigor. In public life, face-saving statements substitute for real accountability. This is not a uniquely Korean phenomenon. Socialist and communist systems have long exhibited the same logic, where access to power depends on relationships rather than adherence to process. But Korea reproduces this same weakness within a democratic and capitalist shell. The result is a state that projects modernity while operating with the vulnerabilities of a fragile operator. Citizens are told they live in a digital pioneer, yet when crisis comes, they are forced to use fax machines and postal mail. International partners are told Korea is a robust and reliable ally, yet in negotiations the country yields under pressure, improvising narratives after the fact to mask concessions. And time after time, disasters are reframed not as preventable failures, but as accidents that could not be helped. BBIU's judgment is clear. The NIRS fire is not an isolated failure of infrastructure, but the continuation of a national pattern of epistemic negligence. Korea's strength in technology, industry, and diplomacy is real, but it is undermined by a governance culture that systematically sacrifices resilience for appearance, accountability for relationship, and truth for expedience. Unless this hierarchy is reversed, placing responsibility above relation, resilience above expansion, and prevention above narrative, the cycle of collapse and superficial recovery will continue. The fire in Daejeon should therefore be read not only as a wake-up call for disaster recovery, but as a symbolic test of whether South Korea can finally evolve from a reactive state into a resilient one.
You've reached the end of the open section of this BBIU content. The complete analysis, with full data, structural frameworks, and extended annexes, is available exclusively to our subscribers. At BBIU, we believe the real value lies beyond headlines, in the depth of structural intelligence that helps leaders and organizations see further. If you want access to the complete archive and future reports, join us at BBIU and take part in the next level of analysis.